Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're jumping into something that feels like a really significant shift, how India started handling cross-border terrorism and also, well, dealing with nuclear threats. We're focusing on a pretty intense period back in April and May 2025.
That's right. Looking through the material, what really stands out is this much bolder stance from India. We need to understand the specific things that happened, the triggers, and then this huge diplomatic effort that rolled out afterwards.
Yeah, exactly. Our goal here is really to connect those dots for you, to
Yeah.
synthesize the information so you get a clear picture of what went down, why it was such a big deal, and maybe what it signals about India's strategy going forward.
Okay, so where do we start? To really grasp this shift, you have to go back to the catalyst. And that was, unfortunately, a horrific terror attack, April 22nd, 2025, in Pahalgam, Jammu, and Kashmir.
Pahalgam, yeah. I mean, it's known as this beautiful, serene valley. People go there for peace and quiet, hiking,
Yeah.
and then this happened. The reports paint a picture of just absolute horror that day.
Absolutely. The information we have points pretty clearly to groups based in Pakistan, familiar names, sadly, like Lashkar-e-Taiba, Lati, and Jaish-e-Mohammed Jem. And they went after tourists on the trails.
The cost was just awful. 26 people killed, mainly tourists just trying to enjoy the scenery. But the details that emerged, they were particularly brutal, weren't they?
Yeah.
Targeting people right in front of their families.
And that specific act, the reports really highlighted this, of the terrorists deliberately wiping the Sindoor, the vermilion mark, from the foreheads of married Hindu women. It was symbolic cruelty.
An act designed to inflict more than just physical harm. I think Prime Minister Modi later called it the most barbaric face of terrorism.
Yeah, that quote stood out. So faced with that, India's response was, well, different this time.
Right. No apparent hesitation, no just writing letters or making démarches initially.
No, the material suggests this was seen as a moment needing immediate, decisive action. So on May 7th, just about 2 weeks later, India launched Operation Sindoor.
Operation Sindoor. The name itself linking directly back to that specific act of barbarity in Pahalgam. And this wasn't just a small border skirmish. It was described as a series of precision strikes.
Precision strikes, yes, and aimed at 9 specific terror camps. These locations weren't random. They were pinpointed in Pakistan itself and in Pakistan-occupied Kashmir, or POK.
And it sounds like a coordinated effort. Army, Air Force, Navy, even the border security force involved. The reported results were significant. Over 100 terrorists apparently eliminated.
Including some high-value individuals, apparently relatives of the Jem chief Masood Azhar. It was a strong message. And the reports also make a point of mentioning the use of Indian-made weapons and stressing the precision involved. This wasn't meant to be seen as random or escalatory in a wider sense.
Okay, so India strikes back hard and precisely. What was the reaction from Pakistan? Predictably, they tried to respond. The material indicates attempts between May 8th and 10th.
Yes, they reportedly targeted Indian military bases.
But it seems those attempts didn't succeed.
That's what the reports suggest. India's defenses held, neutralized the threats.
And then things shifted behind the scenes. There's mention of frantic calls.
From Pakistan's Director General of Military Operations, the DGMO, their top military planner. Apparently, things were getting quite tense.
And the U.S. was involved, too. President Trump played some role in the background.
It seems so. The details are a bit unclear from the outside, but yes, U.S. involvement is noted. And the outcome, by May 10th, was a ceasefire agreed upon by both sides.
But India's fridging of this ceasefire was crucial, wasn't it?
Very. The reports emphasize India didn't portray this as problem solved. It was explicitly termed a pause, not a final resolution. And it came with a very stark warning against any more cross-border actions.
So a powerful military statement first. But then, almost immediately, the focus shifts again. Starting around May 27th, India kicks off this massive diplomatic initiative.
Yeah, this part's fascinating. Not just sending ambassadors, but dispatching all-party parliamentary delegations. This showed, political unity back home on this issue.
All-party, that's key. A signal of national resolve. And the scale.
Wow. 7 different teams fanning out across the globe, visiting 33 capitals. And not just the usual suspects, yes, Paris, but also Singapore, Kinshasa in the DRC, Panama City, South Africa. A truly global reach.
And their mission was clear-cut. Lay out the evidence of Pakistan's alleged state-sponsored terrorism, show the world what happened, and build support for India's zero-tolerance policy. They didn't go empty-handed either.
No, they reportedly carried evidence files, things like Photos allegedly showing Pakistani military figures at funerals for known terrorists, plus that list of 52 UN-designated terror groups said to be operating from Pakistan.
Basically taking the case directly to the international community, government by government. You mentioned some specifics.
Yeah, like in Singapore, Sanjay Kumar Jha meeting Senior Minister Sim Ann. The message was blunt. India won't tolerate nuclear blackmail, and it will strike terror targets precisely. And Singapore, according to the reports, affirmed its support.
And in Paris.
Ravi Shankar Prasad spoke with French parliamentarians. He apparently detailed the links between Pakistan's military establishment and terror groups. And interestingly, he pointed out that the very Pakistani DGMO who oversaw the failed counterstrike attempts was reportedly promoted to field marshal soon after. The French, given their own experiences with terrorism, were reportedly supportive.
And even further afield, like Kinshasa.
Leaders in the DRC apparently pledged to echo India's concerns internationally. They even held a moment of silence for the Pahalgam victims. Similar messages were carried to places like Panama and South Africa. It was a relentless push.
So you have the military action, then this huge diplomatic blanket coverage. And all this happens against the backdrop of what the reports call the elephant in the room, Pakistan's nuclear capability.
Exactly. For years, that's been the implicit threat, right? Any major Indian retaliation after an attack, and there'd be whispers, or more than whispers, about potential escalation, maybe even nuclear. It acted as a sort of deterrent shield for Pakistan's actions, arguably.
But this time, India's message was different. The material highlights this very clearly. No more nuclear blackmail.
Prime Minister Modi said it directly in an address around May 12th, quoted in the reports. India will not tolerate any nuclear blackmail. Full stop.
That's a powerful statement, especially considering India's official no first use nuclear policy. MJ Akbar, a former minister, apparently reiterated that policy, but the overall message was one of resolve, despite the nuclear factor.
Right. It signaled that while India adheres to its doctrine, it won't let Pakistan use its nuclear weapons as cover for sponsoring terrorism. Operation Sindoor itself kind of proved the point.
How so?
Well, it showed India could conduct significant, precise strikes against terror targets without automatically triggering that dreaded nuclear escalation. It called the bluff, in a way.
And this ties into the wider strategic picture mentioned in the reports, like the U.S. Defense Intelligence Agency assessment.
Yeah, the DIA's 2025 threat assessment is relevant here. It apparently noted Pakistan sees India as an existential threat, is actively modernizing its nuclear arsenal, maybe aiming for around 200 warheads, and has deepening military ties with China, including support for things like battlefield nukes. So India's actions weren't happening in a vacuum.
Okay, so putting it all together, what emerges is this, sort of, new Indian anti-terror doctrine, based on what happened after Pahalgam. The report suggests it rests on three main pillars.
Pillar 1 seems to be decisive retaliation, meaning when attacked, the response will be swift, strong, and potentially go beyond previous actions. No more absorbing the blow without a significant counter.
Pillar 2, no nuclear blackmail, explicitly stating that Pakistan's nuclear arsenal won't deter India from acting against terrorism. That's a major shift in the psychological game.
And Pillar 3, which is maybe the most fundamental shift. No distinction between terrorists and their sponsors. Holding the state apparatus in Islamabad directly accountable, not just the groups pulling the trigger.
And there's that quote again from PM Modi that sums up this third pillar. Terror and talks, terror and trade, blood and water, they don't mix. It's a very clear line in the sand.
Beyond the military strikes and the diplomatic tours, India apparently used other tools as well, pushing harder in international forums like the UN and especially the FATF, the Financial Action Task Force.
Right, FATF is key because Pakistan has already been under scrutiny there for terror financing issues. This would add more pressure.
And another measure mentioned is putting the Indus Waters Treaty into abeyance, basically saying, we'll pause cooperation on water sharing until you stop the cross-border terrorism, using economic and resource levers too.
So how did the world take all this? We heard about support from Singapore, France, the DRC.
Yeah, the response was varied. Those countries offered clear support. The U.S. role in the ceasefire is noted, though perhaps with different interpretations of how critical it was President Trump's claims versus maybe a more measured view from Delhi.
And China.
Predictably, condemned the initial attack, but urged restraint on both sides. Sort of trying to keep a lid on things, perhaps wary of wider escalation. One interesting angle the reports mention is mobilizing the Indian diaspora worldwide, using that network as a force multiplier to amplify India's message and build public awareness internationally.
And domestically, that image of unity was powerful. Sending MPs from BJP, Congress like Shashi Tharoor, even Ayman's Asaduddin Owaisi. It presented a united Indian stance on terrorism to the world.
External Affairs Minister Jaishankar apparently tweeted about hashtag Team India, reinforcing that message of cross-party consensus on this specific issue.
And it's important to remember, as the material points out, this isn't just an India-Pakistan issue in isolation. The networks based in Pakistan have alleged links far beyond South Asia.
Right. The reports connect dots to attacks like the 2008 Kabul embassy bombing, the 2005 London bombings, even the 2024 Moscow concert hall attack. So when India acts decisively and launches this global diplomatic effort,
It's essentially trying to ring an alarm bell globally, saying, look, state-sponsored terrorism from here has global implications, and we're drawing a line.
especially when, as the reports claim, you have dozens of UN-listed terror groups operating from one country, that inherently becomes an international security concern.
Okay, let's just quickly recap the key points from this deep dive. It started with that brutal attack in Pahalgam, April 22nd, 2025.
Followed swiftly by India's Operation Sindoor on May 7th, precise military strikes against terror camps in Pakistan and Pak.
Then Pakistan's failed counterstrike attempt, leading to a tense period and a ceasefire by May 10th, which India explicitly called just a pause.
And then came the major diplomatic offensive from late May onwards, with all-party delegations visiting 33 capitals to make India's case and garner support.
And woven through it all was India's very clear message. No more being deterred by Pakistan's potential nuclear threats, no nuclear blackmail.
Taken together, Operation Sindoor and this diplomatic push really do look like a new playbook, a fundamental shift in India's strategy for dealing with cross-border terrorism.
And that ceasefire, it hangs on Pakistan's future actions. According to the reports, it's conditional.
Which leaves us with a final thought, something for you to consider. If the evidence presented about state sponsorship and the global reach of these terror networks is accurate, what does that mean for how the world tackles terrorism, especially when a nuclear-armed state is allegedly involved?
It certainly complicates things. A heavy question to end on. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into a really pivotal moment.